Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Donkey Kong Country 3. In the last part we started off Kremwood Forests after finishing off Lake Orangatanga. No, I didn't look up the world names between parts. What are you talking about? And now we're starting off the next level. This is Springing Spiders. The second level of this particular level aesthetic, which might be my least favorite in the game in terms of its level design, because I feel it's probably the most cramped levels in the game, barring maybe one particular type. But that's because the mechanics in that particular type can be... They lead to things being a bit more cramped than the other ones, I find. Also, I believe the moment we enter the next tree, you can find a warp barrel by throwing Dixie straight up, or maybe it was a moment ago. Either way, there's a warp barrel in this stage as well. They're almost always in the first, like, 3 minutes of a stage. Not 3 minutes, 3%, rather. They're usually very quickly in there. And now I got the return of Squawks, probably the most consistent animal buddy in all of the DKC games. He still controls the same. You can mash the jump button in order to flap higher and higher. You can shoot eggs with the attack button. And you can use those to take out most enemies. Red buzzes, for instance, I believe are still immortal. But he doesn't really have anything else going for him in this game because he doesn't get used as often as he did in DKC 2. I'm just glad he's not a glorified flashlight like he was in DKC 1. With that said, a moment ago you may have noticed that we found some random bear coins just at the end of a particular portion of level design. DKC 3 is pretty good at doing the thing that I think DKC 1 and 2 did a little bit as well, where if you see a suspicious looking bit of level design, rule of thumb, there probably is something there that's just invisible. It's usually just going to be maybe some extra bananas or an extra life here and there, but sometimes you get outright bear coins, and that's a pretty good way to farm them in some regards as well. Because there's a couple ways you can do that, and that besides just Swanky Sideshow, they're obviously hidden across levels, so if you find a good place to get them, you can just farm the level over and over again. But you can also get them from boss fights if you beat them a second time. Just requires fighting the boss fight over and over again, of course. And even then, it's specifically refights that give you bear coins, because sometimes what a boss gives you depends on which boss it is. In that, on the first time you beat Belcha, you get a bonus coin. But we're not getting another bonus coin from a boss fight until, like, the second to last world, I think? Because we're going to be getting some key items we need to progress moving forward from them, usually. The spiders, though, the ones that you use as platforms, at least, are pretty straightforward. Yellow ones bounce back and forth. Red ones wait for you to bounce on them in order to do anything. But from there, it just depends on what the one is. We do have a relatively well-hidden secret here, though. A couple of times, the only way you can tell that there's going to be a secret that leads to a DK coin or a bonus in certain cases is you could just see the slightest outline of a platform on either the very top or very bottom of a screen. And in that regard, DKC 3 can be a little bit of a, oh, I get it, kind of game, if that makes sense. They hide things at times very dickishly. And admittedly, thankfully you can always tell when you haven't found everything in a stage because the title screen, not the title screen, the world map doesn't have the exclamation point on the level. But combing the level over and over again can lead to some problems. Just in terms of being bored of the level. Another reason I think I don't like this particular level type too much is I feel in terms of graphics to hitboxes, the perspective here doesn't work too well, because there's times where I swear I should fall through the platforms or where I swear I hit them when I apparently didn't, according to the game. And admittedly, the trilogy is guilty of that in general, usually. But I feel, in particular, levels like this, it gets really highlighted because of the weird perspective stuff going on. These games were ambitious, don't get me wrong, but I think in terms of, like, graphics to hitboxes and how fair the platforming feels because of that, Donkey Kong Country Returns in a lot of ways I feel is probably the peak of the series in some regards. Some regards, I should note. Because even though I think the Donkey Kong Country Returns games have a lot of good going on in them, well, some things just aren't as good almost no matter what. The soundtracks, for instance, of the Returns games are great, but not as good as Donkey Kong Country 2's, for instance. They also don't have things like Fear Factory or the 2 or 3 songs in this game I really like. Because a lot of the soundtrack is good, only a couple of the songs really stick with me. With that said, time for something a little different. Welcome to Brash's cabin. Hey, it's the banana-brained Kongs. What do you think you're doing coming into Brash's cabin without asking? See that riverbank race? I ran that in 1:15. You couldn't do it in double that time. Called that a decent time on the riverbank. I've given people bigger head starts than that and still won. Where are your manners? Oh, and you left. Sometimes it is pretty easy to accidentally leave those cabins because you just have to press right to do it. Now it's time for us to actually go do the race part of Riverside Race. We need to beat this minute in under a minute 15, according to the clock on the bottom right. I think they only give you the minute 15 goal maybe after you've talked to Brash, I think. I honestly don't remember because, I didn't pay attention to that last part. The big thing to note when it comes to doing this is you really want to do this in a separate run than just going for the bonuses. Because while I think it might be possible to do it in a minute 15, because I think the timer might stop in bonus games, don't quote me on that. I don't trust myself enough to be able to do it in all in one run. The biggest thing to note is play as Kitty, so you can do bounces on the river to help accelerate through some of the platforming, because swimming is slower than running. Roll into the enemies to get some roll boosts, and in general, try to skip over the water wherever you can. Sometimes it's faster to go towards the bonus barrels, like using this to bounce off top of these guys, but you really just want to keep a good pace going. It's not too hard, I'd say. The biggest threat probably comes in if you miss a jump and you have to jump out of the water, or if, say, you fall into one of those pits, you have to take a second to go out of them. As you can see, I finished this with a little bit of time to spare even still, and there's probably people who can do this way faster than I can. I wouldn't be surprised if sub a minute in this stage is possible. But now that we've done that, let's go brag to Brash, because we're clearly good sports about all this. What? You can't have beaten my time. I've held that record for the last 2 years running. You've made me so angry. I could do this, I guess. Including making sounds that are usually made by gremlings. But making him angry causes that log to fall into the river. We'll be able to do something with that after this next stage, Bobbing Barrel Brawl. As I struggle to remember which stage this is until I open it up. Which one is this one? Okay, it's this one. So this stage is going to bring back an old friend, in that we have Ellie again. The main mechanic with this stage involves Ellie using her little suction ability we saw her use earlier, where she can draw things towards her to bring barrels towards you so you can throw them into the water and use them as platforms. But you can also press the L and R buttons to suck up water and then use the attack button to fire it up either straight ahead or upwards at an angle by holding up. The water might as well be a barrel in itself as a projectile because it'll kill more or less anything it touches. This is, I think, Ellie's best trait because it's super cool. I just wish they used it more often because I think it only gets used in this stage and maybe one other. 2 at most after this. I like giving the animal buddies more than just the one tool they usually have. Like Ramby's cool, but he mostly just charged. Espresso could hover and run fast. Unguard was just Ramby for water. Having multiple abilities for an animal buddy is nice. I think Ellie might just be one of the most interesting animal buddies in the series because of that, as by and large they usually only have the one thing to do. I guess Squawks technically, because he at least has different level types going on between being able to just fly or have the race level in 1 or 2 cases in DKC2. I appreciate them just being more of an expansion to your abilities rather than just an extra hit point, is what it comes down to, I feel. Want to be a little careful with some of the coins, because sometimes it's easy to overshoot them in such a way that the barrels roll off screen, and while they usually respawn, again, sometimes they don't. And in levels like this where you do have no way to really roll something after them afterwards, it can be a little troublesome. Also, I should note, in case you have both Kongs active, you can tell if you have an extra hit points, because in levels where you're always the animal buddy, the animal buddy's head on the bottom left dictates you having 2 hit points. In that regard, the levels where you play as the animal buddy the entire time, more or less, can be a little harder than the other ones, in that you can have 2 hit points only instead of 3 with an animal buddy, but oh well. That particular bonus requires some weird trickery to get to screen-wise, because you need to scroll those 2 bugs on screen and then jump off of them, as it's one of the only times they actively use momentum like that. I think about momentum like that, though, and I immediately reminded of, I think there was one particular moon in Mario Odyssey you had to get using momentum while jumping like that. And I know, and I think this might be the first time I've actively talked about playing the game on the channel outright. I know there's at least one, I want to say it was Electroculus in Genshin that required you to do that. Oh yeah, the gacha bugs hit me too. I only play a couple, namely Genshin, Mega Man X Dive, because of course I do, and a little bit of Pokemon Masters here and there. Oh, and Cookie Run. I don't spend money on them, mostly. I don't got time to just wail. By and large, I'd say just getting the Kong letters in any given stage should suffice with offsetting most lives you can lose in a stage. At least in the early game. I'd say Donkey Kong Country 3 doesn't really get super hard in any regards until... of course, the back half for one, but especially, like, the last world is where some of the worst stuff is. But now, because we got the log down the river from Brash, we can now access Eric's Hoard. This is the first of our Simon mini-games. We have 4 crystals here, each marked with the 4 face buttons of the console. I don't think they're marked like that in the Japanese version because the face buttons on the Japanese Super Nintendo were color-coded like that. You just match what the stones glow in, and we free a banana bird. Banana birds are one of our long-term goals in the game. There's several hidden throughout the game's worlds, and even a couple that require doing side quests with the Brothers Bear to free. And in order to get the true ending, you need to free every single one of them. With that said, now it's time for Eric's ambush, I think. The boss fight at this level. Giant spider with a really doofy face. Way you damage this guy, he has a barrel on top of him, bang it into his face. With that said, from the second hit onwards, he won't spawn the barrel on top of him, he'll spawn it on top of that branch up there. With that said, with the way he bounces up and down, you can use him as a platform to reach the barrel. With that said, again, the further you get into the fight, the more he attacks. He'll randomly shoot out green bouncing projectiles that'll bounce once or twice off the walls before just going off screen. And he'll occasionally just aim directly for you. Thankfully, they're slow enough that it's pretty easy to avoid. I'd argue that in some regards, Eric might be an easier boss fight than Belcha. But those are only in very certain regards, because he does have more going on, I suppose. I do believe the GBA version made this arena smaller to compensate for the screen crunch, which was a general thing the GBA version did outside of changing some minor level design things, music, and the color palettes, of course. By and large, pretty straightforward. And for beating him, we get some patches! Our first real key item, and with that, we've also finished off the first 2 worlds, so we're done here in this corner of the world map. We're done near Lake Orangatanga, but we can come over to Blunder's booth for a little extra stuff. I've been watching your progress for a while, Kongs. The name's Blunder, but you can call me Mr. Blunder. So I think you're gonna find everything in the game, man. You don't even know there's a lost world, do you? Whoops, I think I let the cat out of the bag. Blunder, I think, is just there to potentially hint towards things you can do in the game. That's by and large all he ever does or says. So now let's head back up to Funky's Rentals now that we have the patches in hand for something a little different. A patch? Oh yeah, this is just what I needed. Hang on for just a couple of seconds, Kongs, and I'll get you a cool new tub for you to rub-a-dub-dub. So now that we've beaten World 2, we have access to a new boat. The Hovercraft. Before we go, though, we want to go over to Bazaar's store over here now that we have some bear coins and pick up that shell. Because it's the only thing we have enough bear coins for, and even then we have exactly the right amount. Or no, we have 10 over. For some reason I thought it was 15. Either way, we definitely won't have enough for the mirror until the end of the game, more or less. So who owns the castle? Well, I ventured up there once, but if you want to know what I discovered, I'll have to pay you 10 coins. I'm saving for Swankies. Are you sure? Some cheeky lad helped Link was just in last week and asked about the castle too. He didn't have enough coins, but he seemed such a nice fellow that I agreed to accept 500 rupees instead. After he left, muttering something about my shells being the wrong shape or something. Oh well. Hey, you just have a real nice day now, Kongs, you hear? Was that a Link's Awakening reference in particular, I think? If it's not that, I'll be surprised. But now that we have the hoverboat, we can do a bit more in the overworld, because the motorboat was restricted just to this section to the bottom right of Funky's Rentals. The hoverboat, it hovers, so it can jump over little rocks like that, allowing us to access this area over here, and disembark with the B button on this beach to reach Kong Cave, another one of these particular little Simon minigames for Banana Bird. The more of these you do, the more complicated and longer, especially, the Simon sequences get, to the point where I think you're pressing upwards of like 8 buttons plus at a time. It can be tough. Thankfully, you're never screwed out of them permanently. If you fail the Simon minigame, you just leave the area and can come back in. The Simon thing itself does change every time, but you don't need to worry too much about it. And admittedly, I could have done those a little bit sooner, as soon as, I think even part 1, because there's one you can do just right up here on this beach right here. The main reason I didn't is I wanted a more organic portion to introduce it, namely, right now so I can get all this bunch in a row. Some people decide to leave these for literal last. I want to get them along the way, just so I could say I cleared out a world sooner. The banana birds themselves, though, are remotely disturbing. Look up their renders if you're ever curious. They are creepy looking, because they are actually textured slightly like bananas. But let's go give that shell over to Barnacle.
Yes, I used to be a scuba diver, but I've given it up. I just take it easy here at home now. What a beautiful shell. It's just what I need to finish off my collection. Say, Kongs, would you swap that shell for me, bird? I will. You would? That's great. Here's the bird. Please take care of him.
Be careful whenever you give a brother's bear a piece of a side quest like that, by the way, because there's at least one case in the game where if you leave the house as soon as you get the item you need, it won't count, because they need to throw the item you're getting up into your inventory on the top right of the screen for it to truly count. Also, that's me showing off. If you press start and select in a level you've already cleared, you just leave it automatically. It's a quick leave if you want to grind some things out. But yeah, always wait for whatever item Brothers Bear's giving you to actively enter your inventory on the top right. And we got another one right here. I could have done this as soon as you started up the game. I do like this Simon minigame in concept. I think some of the execution of finding them can be a little clunky. Usually it's that every beach has one, but sometimes there's a couple at the end of the game that are just awkwardly hidden. The only time you'll notice them is that the title of them will show up on the bottom of the screen. And you theoretically have a little bit of a choice on where to go from here. First, let's check out Bramble's bungalow.
Hello, Kongs. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Bramble, the famed botanist. The most beautiful flowers used to grow around here, but they died back when those awful machines came.
Now, the moment you talk to him, I believe the flower spawns to my right and you can get it, but you might also have to wait until I clear the level that is on the right side there. You can either choose to head over here to Cotton Top Cove or over to our right to, I believe that world's called K.A.O.S, to go to next, but we're heading to this area first. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 4, we're going to be starting off Cluttertop Cove. See you guys then.